Hi guys. So this is going to be the first lecture about biology statistical analysis. So just to jump right in, why is this biology? Well, the big part of why we're going to use statistics in biology is we have to know if results of scientific studies or experiments are significant and if they matter. Because within populations, in animals and plants and bacteria and anything else, there's going to be variation. And we need to know that if that variability is significant at all. And when we're doing experiments, we have to see if results that we get actually matter. And for this, we are going to use both qualitative, which is qualities and different things like that, as well as quantitative, which is numbers, data, to try to figure out these different things to test our hypothesis. And we have to be confident in all of these different variables as well. So, a real world example of this is prescribing medicine and doctors prescribing medicine. So, generic drugs are really drugs that aren't those different brand name things. Like we have Advil and Tylenol, and those are different brand names, when really acetaminophen and ibuprofen are the generics. And those go for a lot of other prescription drugs like Zoloft, which is an awesome medication for anxiety and depression. The generic name is sertraline. So, do you go with the proprietary blend, the name brand, or do you go with the generic? So, down below, there's a little graph here that shows the effectiveness of our generic and our proprietary. And down here, it looks like the proprietary is pretty good. It looks like that's what we want to use. However, now we're going to add in some variability. So these bars that are on here that go from here to here and here to here, these are error bars. So when these medications were tested, they showed variability, and where this X is, that is the average effectiveness. So if we follow these over, we have quite a bit of overlap between the effectiveness of our proprietary and our generic medication. So when we're looking at this, now which one would you pick? So what if I tell you that this proprietary medication is like $100 a pill and the generic is $1 a pill? Now which one do you pick? Well, for me, the generic looks pretty good for 100 times less, and there's a lot of overlap there, so I would probably pick that one myself. So we are going to use this statistical analysis to both evaluate the data that we get in different scientific experiments and make sense from the numbers. Because when you get numbers from something, you need to know what they mean, and biological statistics really help us to do that. So the first part of this is coming up with a hypothesis versus a prediction. So down below here, we have a bunch of different statements. So I want you guys to take a moment to just read these. I will read them out loud real quick. Oops. So our first one is, if fertilizer is added to the soil, then the plant will grow taller. The deformities were caused by one or more chemicals in the water. If I add fresh or salt to fresh water, then the water will freeze at a lower temperature. The farther something falls, the greater speed it attains. Hypothesize what will happen to the pendulum's motion and final height if its swing is interrupted by the cross arm. So right now in your head, I want you to pick out which ones you think are actual hypotheses. This is a little bit of the problem. So in lower level science classes, we kind of teach you to write hypotheses in the wrong way, which is an if-then statement. So really, this is a prediction. So if fertilizer is added to the soil, then the plant will grow taller. That's not really scientifically a hypothesis. That is a prediction. We're predicting what's going to happen. So if we add fertilizer, then the plant will grow taller. So with that in mind, the two statements on here that are actually hypotheses are number 2 and number 4. The deformities were caused by one or more chemicals in the water. That is hypothesis. We are then going to do a test to find out if our hypothesis is true or if we reject the hypothesis and it is untrue. The second one of this that is actually a hypothesis is the farther something falls, the greater speed it attains. I am saying that this is what happens. I am now going to test this hypothesis to find out if it is true or if it is not true. The first one is a prediction, as well as the third one. The last one is kind of like a question. It's saying to make a prediction. So really the only one, the hypothesis, are 2 and 4. And this brings us to the hypotheses that we are going to use for some of our first experiments, which is a null hypothesis. So this is noted as the HO. So this is the HO, okay? The HO is the null hypothesis. So we are going to use this to either accept or reject the hypothesis with a p-value and chi-square testing. That all seems like a really big, scary thing. That's the last part of what we're going to touch on. So just file that away in the back of your head. I like to think of the null hypothesis as the emo hypothesis. So as growing up as a millennial, early 2000s in high school kid, the emos were like, man, nothing ever matters. Nothing's going to change. That's what a null hypothesis is. It's saying that there is no statistical difference or like nothing is going to happen. So for example, we have hummingbirds. Okay, look at that cute little guy. They are nectarivores. So this means that they eat nectar of species of flowers and plants. So in return for food, they pollinate the flower. That is an example of mutualism. So the flower gets pollinated, the hummingbird gets food, yada, yada, yada. As a result of natural selection, these hummingbird bills have evolved to be different lengths to actually match to certain flowers of their preferred food source in order to increase their chances for survival. So that's natural selection. So in an experiment, researchers were studying comparative anatomy. So we have 2 different species of hummingbirds. We have a red-throated hummingbird, which is the one right here, and a broad-billed hummingbird. So maybe I want to see if the average beak lengths of these hummingbirds in the same area is statistically different. Because if their beak lengths have a statistical difference, maybe they prefer different food items. Maybe the red-throated hummingbird has a longer beak on average, so they're going to prefer these food items, where the broad-billed has a shorter beak, and it's going to prefer these food items. I want to see if there's a statistical difference. So to do this, I need to get reliable data. So I'm going to start with the HO, because the HOs know what's going on. I'm going to start with my null hypothesis. So my null hypothesis is going to be there is no significant difference between the bill length of these 2 species. So now when I'm testing, I am going to try to find a difference. I am going to try to reject my HO. I'm going to say that my HO was lying, okay? That is what a null hypothesis is. So in order to do this, our sample size has to be large enough. I'm not just going to collect 2 hummingbirds and say that, oh, their beaks are different. I need a really, really big sample size. The bigger the sample, the more reliable our data is going to be and have relevant statistical tests for significance. And we also have to be mindful of uncertainty and error, because we're always going to have error. Nothing in life is certain, and we're always going to have error. So with that, for an assignment for today, what I would like you to do is there's an article in Schoology called Why Do Cats Have 9 Lives? I want you to go through and read that and complete the assignment on Schoology, and you're also going to get a piece of paper with everything on it as well. And I want you to read that article and write a null hypothesis, so practice that, of why do cats have 9 lives? And then write an explanation and practice that claim evidence reasoning format that we did so often in general biology, where you are coming up with why do they say cats have 9 lives? Okay, so I want you to try to do that for your first assignment for CAPP biology.